Well, Kansas Western fans, the moment at least a couple of you have been waiting for, the river. So this is the final look, or at least mostly final. I think I'm going to coin a new acronym called Good Enough for Now. So GEFN, GFN. And we're just going to do a low scroll or a low pass over here like we're flying a drone. But all the rapids are in, at least as good as I can make them for now. I'm happy with all the texture on the river. You can see there on the sides, I didn't include a whole lot of texture there just because there are some places where the river's calm, generally up against the edges. But I can always go back and redo that. But what I really like is just how the rapids turned out, the way the rocks are visible, at least partially. In the calmer areas of the river, you can see rock underneath the water line, which is really cool. That's why I wanted to go with resin, so you could see that. And then just the way the rapids worked out, I'm very happy with. Be very interested to hear your opinions. This is my first river ever, so you can't offend me. It's not like I know what I'm doing, but if there's any recommendations as to what I could maybe add to this, and keep in mind the banks are not quite done yet. I've got a lot more detail to add in terms of ground covering and weeds and flowers and trees and so forth. But I just wanted to get the river pour done, and now it's done. I'm happy with it. I'm just happy with how a lot of the details turned out. And I guess that's about all there is to say about that. So following this brief intro video, I guess, the rest of the video is going to be how I did all this, all the different stages, all the different, I guess, just little steps. But this is how it looks for now. I'll be curious to hear what everybody thinks. All right, getting ready to do my first pour for the river now. And these are just all the items that I have in front of me that I need to do this work. I'm not going to try to film actually doing the mixing because I don't want to be conscious of worrying about that. I want to make sure I'm paying complete attention to what I'm doing because this is for real now and I don't want to screw anything up. So you're just going to have to wait until I'm actually ready to pour. I will show you that because that's not that big a deal. But for the mixing, I'm not going to worry about it. Anyway, got my Apodex here, got the resin on the left, hardener on the right. Even though those bottles are pretty much the same size, this is a 50% blend product. So 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener. I've got 4 cups here because it requires 4 cups to do the mixing. A smaller one here for the hardener, the 50%. A larger one here for the resin. I will measure those out individually. The cup weighs just a little bit different, so I'm keeping track of that with my little note here. So you measure out those individual things on my scale, and then you blend those in a 3rd cup. And then once you've blended those, you go ahead and pour those contents into a 4th one, because that way, I guess you don't have any potential leftover residue from the individual resin or hardener anywhere on this 4th cup. And then that's when we'll add the dye once we've got the full blend. I have clear cups here because it's recommended. The way that you know that these things are blended properly is there's no cloudiness. And when you first pour those together, and maybe I'll get more comfortable with this with a later mix, but once you pour those together, the mixture is cloudy. But once you stir it enough, which takes a few minutes, that cloudiness just disappears. And that's how you know you're done. So that's really awesome visual aid. So we'll mix those up. I've got a couple dyes here. A light green and an intermediate green. These are both Vallejo airbrush paints, so they're nice and light. They blend pretty well. I've used different colors on the test bed here. I'm going to try for a little bit more color in here to kind of decrease the opacity. We're going to talk about that later. I've got some gloves here just because it can get messy if I spill badly. And then a craft stick here for stirring. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to get started here with the first blend. Once that's done, I'll get back with you and I will show you the pour. One other thing I forgot to add, this is a 16-ounce cup and these larger ones are 18. I'm going to go for a total of 12 ounces between the hardener and resin, just because I don't want to fill these cups up too much to where it becomes a mess when I stir it. So each pour will be about a 12-ounce pour. So that'll be 8 ounces of resin with 4 ounces of hardener. So we'll see how that works out. All right, so we have our first mixture here, our first pour. We're going to take this in on the river and try it out. All right, I'm going to try to do this one-handed here and see if I can make a giant mess. Now here at the ends of the creek or the river where I was going to pour first, I went ahead and taped the bottom seam of the fascia just in case I missed a seal or two. So we're going to try this now just to kind of force it on this edge and see how it goes. All right, we're going to go to the other end of the river now. All right, first pour complete. Now we'll let those two ends cure, and I think we're going to go ahead and make another batch and start working in the middle. Before I work on the next batch, we're just going to make some comments about what we see so far. You can see lots of little tiny bubbles in here. From my experience on the test bed, those are all going to disappear on their own. They're just going to make their way to the top and just disappear, so I don't have to worry about that. I am liking this green. I think it looks a little bit more appropriate to the prototype, so I'm glad I switched to green instead of brown. And as far as I can tell so far, no leaks on anything, but we'll keep an eye on that because sometimes, I mean, resin's pretty much just like water. If there's a hole, it's going to find it. Just got to give it enough time. So we'll see how that goes. And then what we're also watching is how far this creeps downriver to see how much of a angle we have going downhill. I'm not really worried about how far it goes. I've got lots of resin. I've got more on the way. If it all just kind of spills downhill, that's fine. We'll just do another layer. Okay, the first round is complete. I have been able to completely coat the entire river to varying levels of depth. I've used a total of 96 ounces, which was a single bottle of resin and about half of the hardener. So I still have a whole bottle of resin left, and I was able to get at least the entire river coated for the first round. So I'm going to let this completely cure. There were a few places where you could really see it run. Basically what I did, and I probably should have showed this, but I kind of spaced out each pour. Probably did 5 that were spread out along the entire length of the river, and then the last 3 I filled in the gaps. And I wanted to do that so I could see how much different areas were traveling. This area was one that ran down quite a bit. And then I think there was another area, and you can see here, and I might have poured this thin, I'm not sure, but you can see here that really it just created a coating. So that's another area where it really ran downhill. So that's not a problem. I expected that as a possibility. That's why I've got more on the way, and I'm just going to do some more coats, and we're going to layer this up until we've got a good solid flat surface across in most of the river. Because I want to be able to add rapids after and make it look like it's navigable by raft or kayak. But in several places, it's already reached that state. So some parts of the river are just going to be deeper than others, which is just like the real thing. So very happy with the results so far. I've been blessed with no leaks anywhere, at least none that I've been able to detect. So everything is going as good as it possibly can as far as I can tell. So we'll do another set maybe tomorrow or Sunday, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, we're about, I'd say 30 hours into this river curing, and I just sampled it. I just used basically a bamboo skewer to kind of poke a little bit at it to see where it's at in terms of curing, and I can still poke into it just a little bit. It's a little bit tacky, so that tells me this should be cured by tomorrow. Probably morning, probably no problem. So I'll be ready for the next layer, And what I'm going to focus on are these areas where the resin has really drained down because it ran downhill. And you can see here, you know, this is mostly rocks sticking up. And we want to have a good portion of this perfectly flat. So obviously it could look like it's navigable by raft, because right now it definitely isn't. So we'll probably do another full layer. And you can see this area especially, most of it drained down. This more looks like mud than anything. So at least now you know what the Arkansas River would look like if it ever drained down to nothing. So I'm going to focus on these areas where the water level is really low or non-existent. And then any of these areas that look like they're almost done are likely going to catch some of that. If it didn't really flow that far, though, I don't think. I think in this area, the farthest it flowed was maybe 6 or 8 inches. So that kind of tells me that, you know, I'm dropping an inch from that side all the way down around the corner here. So that tells me, though, even though, you know, it is an inch, the slope is pretty gradual. So hopefully this second round ought to fill up these areas much better. But I have enough material to do a total of 4 pours like yesterday's. So I think I got plenty of material, shouldn't be a problem. It's just kind of interesting to see how it's interacting with the scenery. This area here, this dry riverbed, has remained dry thus far, and I think I built it up enough that there shouldn't be any water under there. If water gets in there, it's not that big a deal. It's just supposed to be a dry riverbed, so we'll see. This culvert here, though, it was pretty flat. I didn't really do anything to the bottom of it, so it's definitely worked back up in there. Doesn't make any difference to me. It's solid foam. If it gets too deep into there, so that'll stop it for sure, because there is caulk underneath it, or I mean glue, construction glue underneath, so it's not going to go anywhere after that. And then otherwise, one other thing I was going to do, I think on all my little waterfall areas, I'm going to add a very small amount and let it run down. This bridge has actually been tested with real water, and the water did follow the bridge all the way down this rock face. So I think I'm going to add some of that, so we'll get to see how that looks. I've got one here, and then I've got one here, just more kind of a seep than a waterfall, but that's the point of this culvert here. And then all the way back here in the corner, I've got another one. I'm going to wait. I'll probably go ahead and do the seepage coming down the rocks a little bit, but I think I might add some water down here. I just haven't finished this ditch yet, this little creek, so I don't want to actually put any in there yet. But anyway, we'll see how it looks after I get the second layer poured on. Okay, real quick, I came in here to work this morning and noticed this on the floor, or on some spare lumber. This is a leak that I found, I guess, at least 24 hours later. And so I tracked it up here and then noticed it had leaked onto the layout. I got extremely lucky that it did not reach the track. I have tested that turnout. It does still work. So I got super lucky there, and I can see the reason why. You can see how it tracked right along the seam up into there, where it followed the seam between these two segments of the layout, and it just kind of traveled right in that gap, and fortunately didn't start dropping until this area here. This is the only leak I found. Kind of surprised about that, because I thought I had the river up here completely coated, but apparently it did find a way out. So for any additional pouring, just to make sure, I am going to go ahead and cover that area underneath in case there's still another hole. I don't know if it found a way behind the rock or what, but fortunately that's the only one I did find. So I wanted to share that to make sure you guys were aware of how that worked out. All right, so getting ready to do another round of pours here. And the way that I've been checking, and I did this on the test bed too, the way I've been checking to make sure it's fully cured is I'll just touch the surface, and if it's nice and smooth and my finger doesn't stick, or it's not tacky or anything like that, that's how you can tell that it's fully cured. So this is nice and ready to go. And I've checked in multiple spots all along the river. The ones that you really want to check for sure, the deeper ones, because that's where the resin is thicker. So you want to make sure that those areas have definitely cured, and this is probably one of the deeper ends, and yeah, that's rock hard. There's no tackiness to it. It's nice and smooth, so we're good to go. Now, I did 8 rounds of mixing and pouring last time, and I got pretty comfortable with the method, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and share one of those blends up with you so you can see how I do it. And again, this is going to be particular to Epodex, the brand of resin. I can't say that for sure it's going to work for anything that you use, but just to give you an idea of how I've been mixing them up. So I'm going to share that with you. All right, we're going to try this out, see how it turns out on camera. So here's what I'm going to start with. I've got my rubber gloves on. I don't need a mask because this Epodex is VOC free. You can see right there. So there's no harmful fumes you have to worry about. I've got 2 different sizes of cups, a 16 ounce and an 18 ounce. And I use different ones because it helps me to make sure I don't screw up between using the resin and the hardener. So I have the smaller cup for the smaller amount and a bigger cup for the bigger amount. So what I also did was I poured some from these larger bottles into some cups. That way it's easier to top off the measurement to make sure I don't mess that up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Got my craft sticks for stirring here. You'll notice I don't worry about bubbles, and that's because in my experience using this product, the bubbles take care of themselves. I don't have to use a heat gun or straw or any of that fancy stuff that I see some people doing. I've already pre-weighed these cups. The smaller cups here weigh 31 or 0.31 ounces. The larger ones are right at half an ounce. So I keep that in mind. All right, and then I use a total of 3 other cups. So actually, I forgot to get one of these smaller ones. 4 cups. So I mix, or I pour to measure each different, the resin and the hardener in its own cup, and then so I've got. They're stuck together for some reason. So I've got the measuring cups here, and then I'll pour those into another cup that I'll mix them in really good. And then once it's mixed up really good, I use a final cup because that's what the instructions call for. And the reason for that is when you're pouring the separate parts into this joint cup, there's a tendency for one or the other to maybe coat the sides of the cup. And when you're stirring it, you may not get all of that. Well, if you pour that out into your project, you might get some of those unmixed components in there, and then it might screw up your resin. And so they tell you to pour your mixture into another clean cup to make sure you don't have to worry about any of those things on the sides or missing any of that. So that's why we're using so many cups. All right, let's get that out of the way. Start with the resin. Turn on this. Now, I've been using a total of 12 ounces, so I need 8 ounces of the resin and 4 ounces of the hardener, plus the weights of the cup. So for the resin, I need 8.5 ounces. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see this measurement, but you're just going to take my word for it. But using these separate cups has made it a lot easier. My hand is shaky because I did a lot of outdoor work already today. Now, doing this 8 times in a row made me really good at figuring out how much to pour and how much I could get away with topping off. I may not have enough in this cup to begin with. Well, I got to pour a little bit more in there. That's first. You definitely want to do this on a surface that you don't mind ruining, because it's almost impossible to do all these transfers between cups and half-gallon jugs without spilling some. And you can see the results on my test bed. So all I'm doing here is just little tiny bits to get to 8.5. And I wouldn't say I was ever perfect, but I was always within a 100th of an ounce or two. All right, there's 8.51. Call that good. So I will set that aside. Now I need 4.31 of the hardener. One thing you got to do is you got to make sure you reset your scale every time. I didn't pour enough of that in here either. It might be good to not do this after I mowed for a couple hours, because I'm all shaky here. This is weird. All right, it went a little bit over, so I am going to pour some back out. Another thing you want to make sure you watch out for is if you drip any on your scale, to make sure you clean that off, because that does affect the measurement. Okay, so I've got my measured out components. Now I'm going to pour those separately into a mixed cup. And again, most all the videos that I saw of watching people make or mix resin together, they were being very ginger and careful about not getting bubbles in it. And I just haven't been worrying about it with this stuff, and I've been lucky so far, I guess. Try to get as much out of here as we can. You're not going to get it all, but it's going to be the same for both cups, so you don't have to worry about your ratio being off. At least I haven't, and I've been lucky so far. And you cannot reuse these cups, because you don't really know, if you're adding too much of one thing or so on and so forth. Now this step here where I'm kind of scraping the sides, you do not do that for the last cup, because you're putting unmixed components in that last cup, and you don't want to do that. And I'll show you. And then to make sure I don't reuse the cups, I just stack the ones that are used. All right, so now I think you can see that's really cloudy. So we just have to stir it until it's not cloudy anymore. And then I try to scrape the sides here and there. Now the dye I will wait and add until I've poured into the last cup, just to make sure I can see the cloudiness. Because once you add the dye, you can't see the cloudiness. And this is how you know you've mixed it up enough or not. So it's kind of interesting. You can see how the cloudiness looks in there. You can kind of see the two components aren't totally blended together yet. And I wouldn't say I ever timed how much I stir. You really can just tell that it's definitely good to go. And I will show you as soon as it reaches that point. All right, that looks pretty good. There might be a few streaks here and there, but that's partially stuff that's left on the sides. But I would say that's pretty clear. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of bubbles. I'm not worried about that. They'll get rid of themselves once we pour it on the layout. So now we use our last cup and pour the mixture in there. Now I'm using the craft stick this time just to try to minimize how many bubbles I'm getting in there. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. Can't really explain. Now this is the step where you do not want to scrape the cup because you might get unmixed components together and then you just messed it up. How critical is that? I couldn't say. So we're just going to let this drip a little bit and call that good. Make sure we burn that cup. I mean, not literally, but not use it again. And then we're going to stir again for a little bit. Now as I'm going to enter the dye, and I've been using this Vallejo Model Air light green. And I've seen a lot of other videos where they're very careful about measuring this out. I wasn't because I couldn't consistently put just a certain amount in there. Got two new ones and one I've already used here. There's the one we used. So I just kind of eyeball it. Or squeeze for 2 seconds. I don't know. The trick here now, though, is the dye really wants to climb right up on your stir stick and up the sides of the cup. So you have to kind of mess with that to get all of it in there. The first time I did this, I thought I'm doing Chicago's St. Patrick's Day river pour here because it was so green. So I was kind of concerned about it, but I think it turned out all right, and you guys can be the judge yourself. Now for opacity, you can kind of judge, you can kind of see how the craft stick, how easily it's seen right up against the cup, and then as you move it towards the center, you can still see it pretty well. So I'm going to add a little bit more paint. And again, I'm not worried about matching. I mean, I'm using the same color throughout the river, but I'm not worried about matching I guess the amount of paint for each mix, because rivers aren't the same color from one area to the next. Not exactly the same. You don't know how deep it is from one area to the next, or how many rocks there are, or if there's sand, or who knows what. So I'm just not worried about that. Once we reach the final point of the resin, then we'll decide if that was a horrible idea or not. Okay, that's much better. You can see it there at the edge, and then it just disappears in the middle. So we'll see how this looks. I think we're good to go. So I'm going to ditch my stir stick here. And I'm going to take you guys over, and I'll show you how I pour it in. All right, I'm going to start here in the middle where the resin is really kind of bled off. So we're going to start to put a second pour here. And I just kind of gently, I am trying to avoid pouring it on these boulders in the river because they would be dry since they're well above the water line. And I'm just trying to pour it fairly evenly so it gets all across the whole width of the river until I run out. And you don't want to try to get every last drop because, as you can see, there is a little bit of dye left in there, and I don't want to mess that up. So that's one. We got 7 more to go. Okay, checking in after doing another round of pouring resin blends here, and the opacity looks fantastic now. I did a little bit more dye in the mix this time than I did before, and I think it's perfect. Because you can still see rocks, but it's not as easy. It's not as crystal clear as it was. So I am very happy with how this has turned out now. It remains to be seen if these high areas end up holding more of the resin this time. I'm just going to have to let it settle out and see. It looks good now. I think I'm still going to need another layer, maybe two, I'm not sure, just because some of these places are just impassable to a raft. And I mean, there's low water situations. I've rafted several times, and sometimes you have to get out and push, but I don't think that's ever a thing on the Arkansas River around the Royal Gorge area. So definitely going to need another level or layer in here to make sure this area is passable. But the rest of it is looking really good. I guess not much more to say than that. So we'll wait another 48 hours, see how this all levels out, and do another round. All right, one other thing I forgot to mention before I start with the third session of pouring, I guess. Can you see the paint streaks here? That is from a mix where I think I was down to the bottom of my paint bottle that I've been using to tint these. And I think the mixture of the paint and the bottle itself was not great. Because, you know, if you don't stir paint really well, it kind of separates. And I think that's what we have here. I'm not worried about it because this takes place in an area that's going to end up being heavy rapids. So all the water effects that I'm going to use should cover that up. And B, it just kind of looks like sediment, honestly, that's on the move. So if I can't cover it up good enough with this third pour and the water effects, I'm just not that worried about it. So just wanted to point that out, that can happen. So make sure whatever tinting that you're using for your resin, make sure it's obviously shaken up really well. Okay, it's now a day after I've done my final pour, which would be 3 total sessions of doing those 96 ounces total a day, or a session, I guess. So I'm going to do a slow, I guess, drone crawl over the video so you can see get a good look of the detail. The reason why I've decided to settle on this is here in the narrows, I'm calling the narrows now, I guess, where you see the rocks built up. I still think that this is, I now think that this is passable, or realistically passable by raft. And the reason for that is I still have yet to do the water effects, which is going to add rapids and a lot of white water in these areas in particular. And even though it looks like it's barely passable, once I add the white water, which will cover this whole section right here, you're definitely not going to be able to tell whether it's seriously passable or not. And I really like the depth where it's at. This area in particular looks like it's barely passable, but again, with white water rushing over those rocks, I think a raft would have no problem making it. And it's kind of funny that I'm so worried about raft navigation on this river, but that's what I'm trying to recreate, right? I'm trying to recreate a river that is raftable, and so I want it to look that way, and I'm pretty sure we've reached that point. But anyway, I don't want to add any more layers because I think I have the depth that I want, and it's just kind of hard to see with that angle because of the way the lights reflect off it. But I'm very happy with the level of opacity. Before I did this pour, I thought the water was starting to get a little bit brown, and this last tint, I think, has brought the green back to it that I wanted, the level of green. So I'm happy with that. And here you can see where I didn't add much rock. I almost regretted that at first, but then I thought there's definitely calmer areas of the river in places, and so that's what we'll just call this. There's still going to be motion to the water, though. There's going to be motion to the water everywhere. There's not going to be any serene calmness like a pond. So I'm going to be adding all kinds of water effects everywhere. But I'm happy with this final layer. I just wanted to do that one video, or this one video here, to show you what it looked like before I mess it all up with water effects. So let me work on those, and we'll get back to you. All right, despite agonizing over the color of the river, I've decided not to mess with it, just because I'm not 100% sure I can fix it with the last bit of resin I have left. I'm not overly upset about it. I just have a different opinion, I guess, than most people, and we're just going to go with it. So one thing I noticed that's really kind of obnoxious is the way these LED lights reflect right off the water. And I was thinking about doing some, I can't think of the word right now, where you kind of dull the light, a diffuser, for the light. Then I decided I would go ahead and try doing some of this water effects, and it diffuses the light all by itself. So you can see right there on the right how you can see into each individual LED light, but right where the water effects are, and this is just like water in motion, it totally gets rid of that. So I'm glad I didn't worry about that too much. So this is my little test section of the water effects. Didn't want to go too far in case it looked bad, but I think it looks pretty good so far. So we're going to continue on with that. Okay, the first layer of water effects is down, and you can see how much it has both, I guess, blurred the lighting. That was solid light strips all the way down that you could see. So it's really done that, and you can see a little bit left where it's still kind of glossy. And so now what's happened is we're kind of fooling the eye into thinking that there's motion in this water. Now I say first coat because I wanted to just get a general coating of the water effects down, but I need to go back and add some higher wave motion, splashing, rapids, especially around the bigger rocks that are sticking out of the water. So we'll come back and do that once this dries, and then we're going to come back after that and do some white touch-up where water is turbulent enough that it turns white. So pretty happy with how this is going so far. And I'm happy I didn't worry about the color, because the water effects has really dimmed down, I guess, that green, and looks much better, I think. So happy with it so far. We'll see what it looks like after I get some more texture added. All right, so before I get too much of this water effects done without showing you how I'm doing it, what I'm using is this Woodland Scenics Water Ripples, and it's just a gel. It's a clear gel. I would say the consistency of maybe caulk. I'm just using a craft stick here. Actually, this is just a bamboo skewer, and just getting a glob on the end here. And in the river, you can see all sorts of rocks, right? Some are sticking out, like this big one here. Others are mostly buried. So all you're trying to do is simulate the water breaking over the rocks. And over these bigger ones, you're going to put a lot more, just kind of glob it on there. And essentially all you're doing is you're creating a texture that you're going to come back later and paint to accentuate that texture. So I wouldn't say, and granted this is my first time doing it, so I'm by no means an expert. I would refer to multiple videos out there on how to do this, either by Woodland Scenics or by just awesome modelers. I'm just kind of feeling my way through this after watching those videos. But you're just trying to glob it on there to simulate where water is being affected by these either underwater bodies or above water bodies. And I'm kind of trying to tease it downstream so that you can, once it dries and I'm painting the surface of these things, you can kind of simulate water action as it all moves in the same direction. So that's how I'm doing this aspect of it. All the rest of the water effects that you see that are pretty flat, all I did was take a brush and dab it repeatedly until there was no clear water left. You will see there is some clear water left on the edges, and that's because where the water slows down, it gets more calm, especially along the edges, unless the current happens to run up against the bank. And I think for the most part, when the bank is, or when the river stream itself is straight, most of the current stays in the middle of the river. And so you will see some parts, and you can obviously go look out in the real world yourself and judge for yourself, but you'll see parts of these even fast flowing rivers that will be fairly calm along the edges. So that's why I'm not trying to get all of it done. But that's it for that. I'm going to finish this and we'll see what it looks like all dried. All right, so what I have going on here is what I believe is going to be the last step in regard to adding texture to the water. And I'll just go ahead and show you what I've done already. What I'm using is this water effects product, and it's good for making waves, waterfalls, all kinds of stuff. And what it is, it's a similar kind of caulk texture where it's just kind of goopy. And as you can see there, this is all what I've worked on here in about the last 20 minutes. I'm just basically creating the texture that I'm going to come back and paint, and it's going to give you that aeration effect of the water as it runs over these rocks and gets all stirred up, adds a lot of air into it. And so all I'm doing is adding just kind of a bead in and amongst the rocks that I want to add this effect to. And it's easy to see all the rocks that I have, they're all jutting out of the surface here. So I'm just adding little bits here and there. And then after I do that, I've got my brush and I'm basically just stippling it across the rocks because I'm trying to tease this material up so that it creates just kind of a texture that when I come back and paint will be sticking up into the air as if water is splashing around all these rocks. And then from there, you kind of have it trail off, and that gives the impression that the aeration effect is dissipating as the water calms down, moving downriver. And you just want to make sure you have it heavier upriver and then kind of have it trail off to nothing downriver. And that kind of gives the viewer an idea of which way the river is flowing, because obviously there is no flow. This is all solid resin. So you have to kind of educate or teach the eye to understand what's happening here. And so that's all I'm doing here, is just adding a lot of this material. Just making sure I kind of make it trail off as it gets further downstream. So I'm going to continue on with this, let this dry overnight, and then come back with the white paint, that Special Woodland Scenics white paint that it's kind of an off-white. It's not a pure white. So that we'll come back and touch up all of this texture so it stays. Because as this dries, it will go clear. So we'll want to come back and hit it with paint to make sure it stays. So we'll check in with that when this is all dried and painted. All right, I said before that I was doing the last step. This is actually the last step. This is where I'm adding the paint, which illustrates the aeration of the water as it hits these rocks. Before, that was just the water effects. It had to dry clear, and then I'm coming back to basically touch up all of the effects, I guess, the texture, to make it more permanent. And so all you can see there's a pattern, right? The flow is from left to right. And so you do a brighter white in front of the rock where the water first begins to get aerated. And then as it goes around the rock, it starts to reduce in clarity and get more thinned out, I guess, where the aeration effect starts to dissipate as the water starts to calm down. And so that's all I'm doing, just starting heavy on the left side of the rock and working off to the right, making sure to add a tail after every rock, kind of showing the aeration effect tailing off. So all I have to do is finish the rest of the river, and you can see where there's still some white left from the heavy-duty water effects where I left it really thick, and that was intentional. That's where there's going to be heavy rapids, similar to this area here, where it's almost solid white because the water's really getting churned up. And so there'll be several areas of that along the rest of the river. So I'm going to finish that up, and I'm going to call it done.